Many thanks for choosing us. The NPP MP for 2nd Andrew Mensah Ejapa has described as unfortunate threats by the U.S. to impose visa restrictions on Ghana. He says considering the good relations between Ghana and the U.S., the issue should not become a subject for dispute. He tells Joy News there is the need for government to react appropriately to the threat. The U.S. Embassy in Ghana on Wednesday released a statement saying it will be forced to implement visa restrictions because Ghana has consistently failed to issue travel documents to citizens awaiting deportation from the U.S. Here are extracts of the statement. All right, so all nations have the right to enforce their immigration laws. All right, so that's a statement coming from the U.S. Embassy, and it says, under International Civil Aviation Organization guidelines, the government of Ghana, through its embassy in Washington, D.C., and its consulate general in New York, has the obligation to interview deportees on a regular basis and issue the necessary travel documents. And it goes on to say, when the government of Ghana fails to meet its ICAO obligation regarding the regular issuance of travel documents, the U.S. government is forced to employ charter flights for deportation for deportees. This is the statement that the Member of Parliament is asking government to respond to. The statement further says the U.S. government has repeatedly engaged the government of Ghana in both Washington and Accra and has urged the government to abide by its international obligations. If Ghana fails to comply with international obligations, the statement continues, regarding the issuance of travel documents, the United States may be forced to begin implementing visa restrictions on Ghana in accordance with U.S. law. We encourage Ghanaians to abide by legal processes if they seek to immigrate to the United States, the statement said. And that is the statement which the MP for 2nd Andrew Ejapa is asking government to respond to. We can now listen to him.
Good afternoon to your cherished viewers. I think it's unfortunate. Of course, I mean, as a sovereign nation, the United States government has a right to, as it were, its views on matters that they think is not being handled in a manner that they would prefer that the government of Ghana handles. And so it's within their right to issue a statement. I would have thought that because we have a very cordial diplomatic relationship with the United States of America, these matters would have been handled in diplomatic circles as opposed to coming out with a public statement. But if you look at the content of the statement, some attempts have been made to resolve it in a certain direction, and they haven't gotten the result that they desire. And so that probably is the reason for the statement. But like the minister rightfully said, I mean, government would necessarily have to respond, and I trust that in due course, as she's indicated, an appropriate response would come so that this does not escalate to levels that would lead to restrictions on visa issuance to the good people of the Republic of Ghana.
Is there even a legal basis for the U.S. to want to do anything like this?
Well, it's a sovereign state, and they regulate their own immigration rules, and so it is within their right to, as it were, impose whatever restrictions that they want, or threaten to impose restrictions if a certain reaction does not come from government. So I think that yes, there's a legal basis to the extent that they are solely responsible for regulating their immigration procedures and laws. Of course, Ghana has our own laws as well, and we have our own procedures and processes for implementing our immigration policy. And so, yes, but like I said, we have a very cordial relationship with the United States of America, and I don't think that we would get to that point. In any event, it is not a policy that has been implemented. No restrictions have been imposed. They've only indicated that if government does not respond in a certain manner by providing travel documents to Ghanaians to enable them travel on commercial flights, as opposed to the United States government putting them on chartered flights, then they would go ahead and impose some sanctions. I don't think that we'll get there. I'm very positive. Like the foreign minister has indicated, we're going to respond appropriately and do what is needful so that the generality of the people of Ghana who have legitimate intentions of going to the United States will not suffer any consequences.
My colleague Joseph Opoku-Gakpo joins me in the studio for more. Hello, Opoku-Gakpo. You've been speaking with the members of parliament. What else have they been telling you with regards to this U.S. restriction statement?
First of all, I met the Minister for Foreign Affairs, the ICAO, in parliament a while ago, and asked for a reaction to the statement that's been issued by the U.S. Embassy, and she was drawing attention to the fact that this is probably a response to a previous media session that they had and put out some details on this particular issue. But her point was that they are not responding to it now. We can expect a full response from them subsequently, but for now, government is keeping silent on it. But again, this is an issue that has come up in Parliament on a number of occasions, specifically in relation to the about 7,000 Ghanaians in the U.S. that the U.S. authorities have indicated are to be, deported. Right. Even last week, Friday, it came up when one of the MPs who's filed a question asking that the minister and officials of the U.S. Embassy come to brief the House had indicated that the question had been pending for far too long. And so even as of last week Friday, he raised it and was asking when exactly the opportunity will be given for the government officials and the U.S. officials to appear at least before the Committee on Foreign Affairs to clarify what exactly was happening. For both members on the majority side and those on the minority side, they think the threats in quotes, it's unfortunate that it's got into that and threats are being issued, but they think that it's about time that government and the authorities in the U.S. sat down and cleared issues up so that then if the people need to be brought home, then they are brought home in very humane
I get the sense that they would have loved the issue to be dealt with even before it got to this stage. And that's why they're very passionate in asking Parliament to summon the minister to provide some answers. What did the Speaker say about that?
No, it's actually not come up today on the floor itself in conversations with MPs. Then they make the point that they are going to intensify the effort to get the minister to appear before the House in order to brief members of Parliament. And even for those on the majority side, they indicate that a conversation will start with the Minister for Foreign Affairs to get her, probably if even not a direct response to the question, a statement, because she would usually do that when she appears before the House. You would recall the issue with the Gitmo 2 when it became quite controversial.
Yes.
She didn't, get a situation of her being summoned. She came up herself and indicated to the Speaker that she had a statement that had to be delivered, and she got it delivered. And those channels, we understand, are also being used to get her on her own to show up in the House with a statement to update MPs on what has been happening with this particular issue.
I know beyond this, a lot of activities have taken place in Parliament. What else do we need to know from Parliament?
There's been the approval of a tax concession, a tax break for Anglo Gold Ashanti, the mine company which is in the Obuasi area, and the concern has been that they've been struggling a little. So the tune of about 300 million, Parliament debated a request from the Finance Minister for that to them, and the House eventually approved it. Again, there is what they describe as the stability agreement between government of Ghana and Anglo Gold, which had laid out a number of things that government will be doing for the company, even as they operate in the country, which had been in existence for a number of years now. The original one had expired and it had to be renewed. Approval was again given for that on the floor of Parliament earlier today. Those are the two major items that the House dealt with.
Right, many thanks to you. Joseph Opoku-Gakpo is our man in Parliament, and he's been updating us on everything that happens in that House. Meanwhile, earlier, Member of Parliament's Foreign Affairs Committee and MP for Bolsa South, Dr. Clement Apak, said Parliament must summon Foreign Affairs Minister Shirley Ayoko Botchwey before the House to answer questions regarding what he calls a statement between Ghana and the U.S. Dr. Apak says this statement has a reason because the minister hasn't handled the issue prudently. He spoke earlier with my colleague Mamavi Ouso Abwaje.
I've made comments publicly. When the ambassador spoke on your own network, I was the one who was called to proffer my opinion. And I remember encouraging him to stand firm and not to allow the Americans to bully him, and that he should assert himself in working in the interest of Ghanaians.
Don't you think the bottom line really is money? Because if really, according to every search that you've done, there's indication that the people that you claim to be Ghanaians are indeed Ghanaians, and you want to bring them back home because they don't have documentation. The only reason I'm thinking that our embassy would not want to take responsibility is if we have to put them on commercial flights, it would require that we get tickets for them, and that won't be free. Well, is the bottom line on money?
Well, the point is that all of these matters could have been clarified if only the minister had responded appropriately, or if government had responded to the concerns that the ambassador had raised. But be as it may, the first batch that came at the 86, they were brought in a chartered flight. And so why is it that the Americans are now changing the narrative? Was it that they were unaware?
Isn't that cost to them?
Was it that they were unaware of this law? So if they did it before by bringing so-called Ghanaians who were not permitted to be in the U.S. by a chartered flight, why are they now trying to change the rudiments of the game? And these are all legitimate questions that I felt should have been answered either by the minister or the ambassador if he had appeared before the parliamentary subcommittee.
Okay, so we are where we are today. Who can best answer these questions that you're raising?
It's obvious. It has to be the Minister for Foreign Affairs and Regional Integration. This is squarely her portfolio. It is squarely her responsibility, and I'm disappointed that she had allowed this to fester to a stage where we are now being threatened by the Americans.
Can your committee, can Parliament do anything now?
Yes, Parliament definitely can always do a lot. As I speak now, Parliament has the capacity to summon the minister to appear before the August House, even tomorrow or perhaps Monday, to deal with this matter because it has assumed a level of ultimate agency. And indeed, the subcommittee can also summon both the minister and invite the American ambassador to the committee to come and, present to the committee what the issue is and to look at how best it can be handled. But I think it's a very worrisome development that requires urgent attention.